In a speech following escalating tensions, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah accused Israel of declaring war on the Lebanese people. This came after a series of Israeli airstrikes targeting Hezbollah infrastructure, including rocket launchers and weapons facilities in southern Lebanon. Nasrallah blamed Israel for deadly explosions of devices used by Hezbollah members, referring to the incidents as a war declaration and vowing retaliation. While his rhetoric called for revenge, his tone fell short of signaling an all-out war. Israeli defense officials indicated that the conflict in northern Israel is entering a new phase, with both sides increasing military activity. Despite the intense exchanges, Nasrallah's speech was seen as more restrained, avoiding further escalation for now. However, fears of a larger regional conflict remain as both Israel and Hezbollah continue trading blows.
We begin in southern Lebanon, where Israel says its fighter jets have pounded more than 100 Hezbollah targets. Israel's military says they hit rocket launchers and weapons facilities as they traded blows with Hezbollah across the border on Thursday. These strikes came as Hezbollah's leader blamed Israel for the deadly device explosions targeting the militant group, which is considered a terrorist organisation by many countries. Hassan Nasrallah described the blasts as a declaration of war and he vowed to take revenge.
Fresh Israeli strikes hit southern Lebanon, while Israeli jets flew low over Beirut, breaking the sound barrier. The acts timed to take place exactly as Hezbollah's leader made this address.
Over 2 days, in 1 minute on Tuesday and in 1 minute on Wednesday, the Israeli enemy was aiming to kill no less than 5,000 people in 2 minutes without caring about any limits. And they have no problem with where they are killed and how they were killed.
Dozens of people have been killed and thousands injured after hundreds of pagers and walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah exploded. Hezbollah blames Israel and admits the bombings have delivered a severe blow. While the attacks appear to have targeted the group's members, many civilians have been caught up in the violence. Hospitals have been overwhelmed. Residents are now fearful of their electronic devices.
Can we expect any good from Israel? Children are being killed. Their parents had small devices and they were detonated. Of course we're scared, my children, my siblings' children, all of us. Who can feel safe? We have 5,000 injured in just 2 days. This isn't a small matter. It's war. Who can secure their phone now? When I heard about what happened, I left my phone on the motorcycle and walked away.
My sisters and I have iPhones, and when concerns arose about iPhones and lithium batteries, my siblings started avoiding touching their phones, fearing they might explode. It's a normal reaction. We are a country that has been hacked.
While Israel has not acknowledged the attack, its defense minister says the country is in a new phase of war.
Our goal is to safely return the residents of the north back to their homes. As time goes by, Hezbollah will pay an increasing price.
Hezbollah says it will continue its attacks on northern Israel as long as the war in Gaza continues, and is vowing retaliation for the bombings of recent days.
Let's get more now from DW's Tanya Kremer in Jerusalem and Mohammed Shrater in Beirut. Welcome to you both. Mohammed, we'll start with you. We heard Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah just then saying that Israel has declared war on the Lebanese people. How do you think Hezbollah is going to retaliate now?
Hezbollah's chief vowed to seek severe revenge, but did not provide details about the nature of the retaliation. But most importantly, his speech was widely perceived to be below the all-out war level. Now, to better understand the situation, let's draw the sequence of events of this week. On Monday, Israel said the return of Israelis to the north is now a war goal. On Tuesday, thousands of pagers used by Hezbollah detonated simultaneously. On Wednesday, hundreds of walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah detonated also simultaneously. The death toll of both device attacks is at 37, and about 3,000 wounded. On Thursday, Nasrallah delivered a speech and said that the Israelis will not return to the north and that his militant group will keep attacking northern Israel until a ceasefire is reached in Gaza. This was followed by the largest and the widest wave of Israeli airstrikes on southern Lebanon last night. And by the end of this, the same day, Hezbollah had claimed 17 attacks on Israel. So technically, we are in the peak of the tension on this front in nearly a year since last October.
Right. Tanya, Mohammed just mentioned it then. Israel says it wants to get displaced Israelis back into their homes in the north of the country. Do we have any idea how it's planning to do that, given these soaring tensions?
Well, so far we're hearing Israeli officials, and among them most prominently the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, saying that the gravity of the conflict is now moving north. And that is for the moment mainly translated in moving resources to the northern border, like a division that was moved north, more exercises, but also, of course, the preparedness, the alertness of the military. And basically, there's the emphasis is now given more to the military route, and it seems that the government has lost somehow patience to look at a diplomatic solution. And we're seeing this also, as we just heard, the intensifying fighting going on between Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and northern Israel. Now, the IDF, the Israeli military, said that in a statement this morning that its fighter jets attacked over 100 Hezbollah missile launches that were ready, as they say, to launch their missiles since late Thursday. And also late Thursday night, they had changed for the overnight the home front guidelines for many communities in the north, for people who are living there in this region, saying they have to stay close to shelters. They shouldn't be gathering. They shouldn't be out in open areas. Now, this was for the moment. This was lifted again this morning, but again, air raid sirens also went off. So it's a very, very volatile situation there.
Yeah. Mohammed, in Beirut, back to you. It's arguably been a pretty traumatic few days for people in Lebanon. Explosion devices. Are people afraid of what might be coming next?
Well, even though life is almost back to normal here in Beirut, we've been hearing growing concerns from people about the use of their personal tablets and mobile phones. And many have been also concerned about their solar system's battery, that it may blow up in further attacks. So there's a growing tension here about these households and personal devices. Also, there's growing fears of a large-scale war with Israel after these attacks and the escalating tension on the southern border of Lebanon. Even though Nasrallah's speech yesterday did not raise the roof and was below the all-out war, this cannot be ruled out in such tense times, really. In fact, there's a general feeling that we're closer to a larger war than any time ever following the latest events, and that is what people are worried about.
Thank you very much for that, Mohammed Schreiter in Beirut and DW's Tanya Kremer in Jerusalem. Thank you to you both. I'd like to welcome Simon Mabon now. He's focused on the Middle East as a professor of international politics at Lancaster University in the UK. Simon, the Israeli Air Force has launched an intense wave of bombardments on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. What do you think Israel's plan is here?
Well, we know what their stated aims are, which is to reintegrate members of the northern communities that were evacuated in light of tensions between Israel and Hezbollah post-October 7. But what that actually looks like, I guess there's a couple of different scenarios. So we don't know if what we've seen over the past few days is a precursor to an all-out invasion of southern Lebanon. That's what I guess many are fearing, that this would escalate and involve a full-on ground incursion, or whether it is an attempt to re-establish a form of deterrence between Israel and Hezbollah, and by extension Iran and other members of the so-called axis of resistance. And if it is the latter, then it's emblematic of what we've been seeing that some have called a quote-unquote shadow war across the past few months, as the various actors involved to try to reassert sort of red lines that will stop any wider escalation.
OK, so escalation, incursion or deterrence, you're saying. Israel's sabotage of Hezbollah pages and walkie-talkies, though, is being seen as a tactical success. But does that make sense strategically if it isn't the prelude to some kind of wider offensive against Hezbollah?
Well, it invokes fear. It creates paranoia. It's psychological operations. It's psyops. It's generating this real sense of paranoia as to what might happen next. Your package earlier spoke of people leaving their phones on bikes, and I've seen stories and spoken to people who switched off baby monitors, for example, fearful as to what might happen. So it's generating a fear. It's a very clear attempt at demonstrating, quote unquote, grey zone superiority, the idea that you can conduct these types of acts that are seen to be, and I say this very carefully, seen to be under the threshold for a wider escalation, but still demonstrate military superiority. Now, that is not me saying that this is under the threshold. This is what is seen to be by people working in this grey zone area, seen to be the general tactic. You want to demonstrate that you can do these types of things without pushing it towards a wider escalation. Now, of course, this is seen to be by many people around the world in breach of all manner of different international humanitarian laws, rules of war, etc., etc. So there are costs, but the big thing here is that people of Lebanon are scared of technology right now. Right.
Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has pledged revenge for the pager attacks. What options does he have?
Well, he couldn't really say anything other than that, I guess, given that Hezbollah, this party of God, this Lebanese resistance organization, has generated its essence, its ideology predicated on resistance to Israel. It could not just let this go. But listening to his remarks and thinking through what he said, it's not a call for all-out war. It's not a call for a dramatic escalation and retaliation. It's very similar to what we've heard from other members of this axis of resistance. It's very similar to what Iran has said in the past after the killing of various prominent Iranian figures and the killing of the former Hamas leader. So it's demonstrating that it's trying to continue with its quest of standing up against Israeli aggression, is what it seems to be, Israeli aggression, but it's also pushing it to a point that doesn't lead to an escalation on its part. And I think that's a very, very difficult and delicate balancing act.
OK, so not a call for all-out war, you're saying. What role does Iran play here in Hezbollah's decision-making?
Well, Iran has got a very close relationship with Hezbollah. It helped found the Party of God back in 1982. It's provided ideological support. Hezbollah follows Iran's ideological worldview, this idea of velayat faqih, the regency of the jurist. But over time, the relationship has ebbed and flowed a little bit, and Hezbollah has sought to assert its own agency, to take its own decisions. We saw that in 2006 when Hezbollah went to war with Israel without a green light from Iran. So it is a close relationship, but it's not just what some would call a proxy relationship where Tehran says, you must do this, and Hezbollah says, OK. There's a complexity to it. But the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon was allegedly injured in the pager walkie-talkie blasts. So Iran is not happy. The leader of the IRGC has called for retaliation. So I guess we just have to wait and see how Iran tries to respond without pushing towards a wider escalation.
Thank you very much for your insights there, Simon. Simon Mabon, a professor of international politics at Lancaster University in the UK.
I'm now joined by David Daoud, senior fellow on Israel, Lebanon and Hezbollah at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington. So, David, how much closer is the region to a wider conflict?
Thank you for having me on. I wouldn't say we're necessarily closer, at least if we're talking from the perspective of Hezbollah's response. If we look at Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah's speech today, it was mostly an exercise in damage control, a re-emphasis that Hezbollah will continue the spate of and tempo of attacks against Israel that it began on October 8th when it began attacking Israel without provocation to support its allies in the Gaza Strip until a ceasefire is achieved in Israel, and a promise that it will retaliate for the telecommunications device attack at some point in the future, but he didn't specify a time, didn't specify the nature of such a retaliation. So from Hezbollah's side, it doesn't seem like their disinterest in turning this into a wider conflict has changed. From the Israeli side, however, we see patience running out with diplomatic efforts to return the citizens of northern Israel to their homes safely.
Well, you said Nasrallah was engaging in damage control, and he also called the attacks using pagers and walkie-talkies unprecedented. Are we any closer to understanding how exactly this was carried out logistically?
Well, there have been conflicting reports on how the Israelis were able to carry this out. Initial reports said that the Israelis somehow sent a signal to these beepers that made the batteries and the lithium-ion batteries explode. I'm no explosives expert to know if that's possible or not. Other reports indicated that somehow the Israelis interdicted a beeper shipment that Hezbollah had ordered to substitute for their cell phones and other communications devices. They thought this would be more secure from Israeli interception from a spying point of view. And when the Israelis interdicted the shipment, they implanted a small amount of explosives in these beepers, which were then shipped to Hezbollah, which would order them and would distribute it to its members. I've also seen reports that the company from which Hezbollah ended up buying these beepers were an Israeli shell company. So rather than interdicting the shipment, the Israelis had these beepers and telecommunications devices pre-prepared and sent to Hezbollah. And once these devices were distributed to Hezbollah's members, the Israelis seem to have set them off remotely from within Israel. The exact mechanism of that, again, we're not sure. The Israelis obviously haven't claimed this or disclosed further information about how exactly they were able to execute this attack.
Now, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, that Israel was shifting its focus in the military campaign. If Israeli intelligence was behind this attack, what exactly do you think their goals were?
Look, for the past week and a half, we've heard talk from Israeli officials, namely Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, but others, that the weight of fighting will be shifting to the north. The cabinet made returning Israel citizens to the north an objective of the war. This can obviously and unfortunately only be achieved militarily, and they authorized Israeli Prime Minister and Defense Minister to take any action necessary, either offensive or defensive, to accomplish that goal. This could probably have been the first softening blow against Hezbollah, disrupting their telecommunications network, killing dozens of their fighters, severely wounding over 200, and wounding to some degree thousands of others. If you think about where these wounds seem to have been, either to the eyes, hands, or the pelvic region, right? This would have put thousands of Hezbollah fighters out of commission. So it could have been softening a softening blow, one that would reduce Hezbollah's fighter capability by several thousand, and disrupting their communications as a preliminary step to perhaps broader military action. But that can't be certain yet.
All right, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there so far. That was David Daoud from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you so much.